Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
After a lot of Ignite, which we talked about for the last 2 weeks, we're going to talk about some news. And some of this may be a little bit older, but I found that they were really interesting. So, as usual, I have a list of topics that I have ready to talk about, and these were on the list. And so, just kind of going right into it, the first one, there was a bit of news about a ransomware gang that actually filed an SEC complaint over their victim's undisclosed breach. So this was Alpha/Black Cat ransomware operation. And they basically took their extortion to the next level by filing an SEC complaint against their victim, which was MerdianLink. MerdianLink is a publicly traded company that provides digital solutions for financial organizations such as banks, credit unions, and mortgage lenders. And the ransomware gang said they breached MerdianLink's network on November 7th and stole company data without encrypting their systems. And then they tried to contact and arrange payment for the stolen data, but MerdianLink wasn't responsive. And so because of that lack of response, they decided to extort more pressure by sending this complaint to the SEC. And to show that their complaint was real, Alpha published on their site a screenshot of the form that they filled out. Now, Adam and I did talk about the new SEC rules a few months back, where they're adopting new rules against all publicly traded companies, where they have to report a cybersecurity incident within 4 business days after a registrant determines that a cybersecurity incident is material. However, the SEC rules aren't actually set to take effect until December 15th, 2023. Now, I know a lot of organizations have already started to comply with that just in preparation. If you remember the Las Vegas breaches for Caesars and MGM, and then there were quite a few before then as well. But the rules actually haven't taken effect quite yet. Very soon, though. MerdianLink did confirm the cyber attack, and they said, based on our investigation to date, we have identified no evidence of unauthorized access to our production platforms, and the incident has caused minimal business interruption. However, they were a little bit light on details about what type of information was actually taken and whether or not customer information was involved in that. But overall, I think this is a really interesting story, because this is the first time, I think, in history that a cyber criminal organization actually filed an actual complaint in the SEC to try to extort or put more pressure on the victim to pay up. So, interesting tactic, as some would say, interesting tactic, Cotton. We'll see how it pays out for you. So I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to materialize into long-term tactics that cyber criminals will use, but overall this was at least interesting to hear about.
MerdianLink is, as you mentioned, publicly traded. That's why they're required to comply with the SEC rules. I went and looked them up in case you were curious. MerdianLink has been publicly traded since July of 2021, so they don't have a long history of being a publicly traded company, a hair over 2 years. Their stock is currently trading about 20% below when they initially had their IPO, and their market capitalization is about $1.4 billion. So in terms of publicly traded companies, especially on the New York Stock Exchange, not particularly large, but not super small either. Reasonable size. So this is not like a small or medium business. This is an enterprise organization. I was laughing through a lot of the description just because the concept to me is funny of that attack group doing that kind of self-reporting to the SEC. Like you mentioned, Andy, I'm curious if it will continue or if this is just a shot across the bow, because ultimately the goal of an attack group is to get paid. Does this increase your likelihood of getting paid? Maybe it proves that you will follow through on your threats if the company doesn't comply with you. And it is certainly a way to cause reputational and financial damage to a company. But again, does that increase your likelihood of getting paid? That's why we talk about how ransomware groups typically will, if you pay the ransom, will help you decrypt their files because it's bad for business not to. Nobody's going to pay a ransom if you don't keep your end of the bargain. And so I think this is ultimately showing that they will keep both ends of the bargain. If you comply and pay up, they will help you. If you do not comply, they will cause damage to you. And this is a new method of doing that. So somewhat humorous, but certainly interesting. I don't mean to make light of any cybersecurity incident. I know that results in sleepless nights, people losing their jobs, and those are not things to make light of. But it is a novel method leveraging that new SEC rule that's going into effect next month. Well, actually, by the time you hear this month. And so again, just kind of a interesting story. We'll have to continue to track this and see if this continues to be a tactic that ransomware groups deploy.
Almost similar to the double extortion attack that we've been hearing more and more about, where number one, they breach you and then they demand a ransom, and then they also demand another ransom, and if you don't pay, to prevent them from releasing your information on the dark web or wherever. So that double extortion, kind of similar, I think, in tactics here.
Right. Good call out there, because the initial extortion is encrypting your files, but they seem to want to do more than that. And this is how cybersecurity works, where it's that cat and mouse game. And I think as organizations have gotten better about doing business continuity and disaster recovery planning and having quality backups and having a way to get back online without complying with ransom, which we all should encourage companies not to pay the ransom, they're finding other ways to encourage that ransom paying, and it's through that second layer of extortion. And I could very well see this continue because, to your point, Andy, I don't think this reduces their chance of getting paid. And that's their ultimate goal. In fact, I think it probably does increase it. So we'll see how it plays out. This is early days of a new technique, but I would imagine we will see more.
Or to just get out in front of it. If there is something detected and you're publicly traded, just comply with the SEC rule and you're kind of out ahead of it. So it's like, haha, I've already reported it to the SEC. You can't extort me there.
Right. Obviously, that's the ultimate best way for everyone to go.
So the next story that I thought was interesting comes out of Las Vegas. And Adam, I know that you often think that one of the biggest concerns in cybersecurity is the small and medium company, the mom and pop shops, the ones that don't have a lot of resources. I also think the medical industry, especially the smaller offices, you have chiropractors, you have dentists, and in this case, a plastic surgery office. You know, a lot of those, I think there was a few years ago, there was an IT provider that was compromised that provided services for multiple dental branches. And because of that, multiple dental branches were compromised because their service provider was compromised. A lot of medical offices don't have the technical expertise. They're running dated systems. Take a look at your next dental appointment or your next doctor's appointment and see what operating system they're running. Some of them are still running like Windows 7, because the software that they use for scheduling, for viewing records, they haven't been updated to run on the modern operating systems, and they're dependent on them. So I think that is one of the more critical places that cyber criminals have been looking at. And in this case, a plastic surgery office was breached, and information like personal information, names, social security numbers, and unfortunately, nude photos of the patients that were taken before and after the surgery were part of that stolen information. So the FBI is now investigating how cyber criminals got a hold of those medical records from this surgery office, which was Hankins and Son Plastic Surgery Associates. About a dozen women involved have filed a lawsuit against the company. The breach actually happened back in February, and the cyber criminals downloaded patient information, posted it online, and the photos along with full names, addresses, emails, including the medical records, none of the documents posted online were encrypted. And through investigation, the reporters were unable to find out how Hankins and Son were storing their data per HIPAA rules. Obviously, documents shouldn't be in the clear. They should be encrypted. More than 12,000 patients may be involved. The practice sent letters to patients in March and April notifying them of the breach. And on October 17th, the FBI actually issued an alert titled "Cyber Criminals Are Targeting Plastic Surgery Offices and Patients." And obviously, when this type of information is involved, it raises the awareness, and not only that, but just the embarrassment of the patients, right? Like, they're kind of caught in the middle. They weren't extorted in this particular case, but there was a similar tactic a few years ago in 2020 where that Finnish therapy business, I don't know if you remember that, Adam, but their business was breached, and the cyber criminals actually went to the patients themselves to try to extort them for 200 euros to stop the cyber criminals from posting their information online. In this case, the information was posted and the cyber criminals were still trying to extort the surgery office. But either way, I think the victims in this case are the women, and obviously, like, they're kind of caught in the middle. They weren't asked for the money. It's either way, it's still terrible. And I think overall, this is a huge area of concern if you're working in those small, medium businesses, those smaller medical offices. You're more susceptible to attack because of some of the things that I just mentioned, right? Like out-of-date operating systems, out-of-date software, just not focused on IT.
This is where you see that divide between medical practitioners that tend to be part of a larger group versus the ones that tend to be very small partnerships or sole proprietorships. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Dental offices, huge one, because almost all dental offices, I'm sure there are some groups, maybe some chains of dentistry, but for the most part, like the one I go to, it's two dentists run and own the business, and they're not affiliated with some larger group, versus at least my primary care physician is a larger group. I'd still not sure I'd classify it even as enterprise class, but certainly a medium to larger size business, where I would assume they at least have reasonable cyber multi-clinic, multi-hospital facilities in the area, and probably have certain standards to meet in order to have interoperability with them. So I think they're okay. But another one where you see a lot of those small businesses, plastic surgery. And I think the last point, trying to hit on reputational damage of MerdianLink by notifying the Securities and Exchange Commission, you're tapping into that same sort of human emotion of embarrassment, of having something shared before you want to share it, or if you ever want to share it. Oftentimes, although this has changed in the Instagram age, a lot of plastic surgery is done in very private circumstances where the patients don't want to disclose that they have participated in it. You talked about therapy. That's another one where patients tend to not want to be public about it. And so you tap into that human emotion, and you're leveraging it to get paid more. And it just makes sense from that perspective of leveraging that against people. but it is really malicious and really evil to do. And I'd say it's a very big difference between hitting some large enterprise where the board or the shareholders or the C-suite has decided not to invest in cybersecurity to the risk of their customers when they have all of the resources and all of the capability to do it. Not saying I'm defending the attackers, but there's a little bit of maybe you could have and should have done more. But in a lot of these cases, to have truly completely effective cybersecurity, it would pretty much put them out of business. They can't afford it. And to leverage that feeling of embarrassment or privacy against people is extra evil. So this, although I may have laughed at the Meridian thing a little bit, this is absolutely just gross and no laughing matter. And unfortunately, it's not going away. And so I don't know what the answer is here. I think there's an opportunity to do more managed services for some of these organizations. I know in the town where I went to college, there's a company that provides dental office software. And a lot of actually people I went to school with now work there. And I don't know exactly about their business. They're small themselves. I'm not even sure if I would classify them as enterprise size, but maybe they could offer more managed services for their customers to help secure and protect them. I think it's one of those things that benefits from scale. Cybersecurity benefits from scale. And any way we can build scale while still respecting these individual proprietorships or small partnerships would be really valuable, because I don't see that business model as going away. I see, especially in the Instagram age, you have literally famous plastic surgeons today who are very popular, and people want to go see that surgeon because they specialize in this body part or this thing. And you don't go to like, well, I'm going to go to my multi-specialty clinic to go to their plastic surgeon. You're going to go look out the specialist who's really good in what you want. And so that's going to continue to encourage plastic surgeons to strike out on their own. And again, it's just a highly attractive target. So this is just, it's sad all around. And I don't know what the answers are. I think something to do with creating more scale and offering more managed services that are available at a reasonable cost, and that all these individuals can kind of jointly buy into and benefit from scale is the only way we're going to protect them better moving forward. But hopefully these sorts of incidents continue to be a wake-up call to improve it in that space. Because you're right, Andy, I have this running thesis on the show, and it's yet to be disproven, that the greatest cybersecurity risk is in small and medium business.
I wonder whether that's going to change, mainly because I think about what employees in these type of businesses are going through and what they're trying to do to make money throughout the day and what their business model is like. Cybersecurity and maybe even these incidents that they hear that we're talking about, they don't hear about this. They don't stay up on the news. They don't know what threats are out there. You know, think about the two-person dental shop that you go to. Mm-hmm. They're probably just focused on dental things, and then they go home at night. They're not watching the news to see what breaches are happening, right? They're not listening to a cybersecurity podcast. And so I only think that maybe in some sort of regulation way, unfortunately, we already are fairly regulated in a lot of areas, but like this SEC one that forces publicly traded companies to disclose cybersecurity attacks, which ultimately will help raise cybersecurity standards across the board, because now you're having to report them. You have to involve with shareholders. Maybe some sort of regulatory body can, bring medical standards to that. Well, obviously we already have HIPAA, mm-hmm. which should already, regulate the storage of patient data and how that's being, used and everything. So they're at least thinking about it on that end. And again, we don't know in this particular case how the information was stored, but I would assume that if you fall under HIPAA regulations and you breach that, there are heavy fines for that as well. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe they just weren't storing stuff. And also the other thing too to mention is you said some of these cybersecurity things might put the businesses, out of business because it might cost too much. But there are things that you can do. And again, like we know this, right? Like just basic employee training. I think a lot of these smaller organizations are breached through like social engineering, just calling over the phone and getting someone to reveal a password or a username login, something like that. Very simple. Basic email security with phishing. Obviously, those are major vectors still that don't cost a ton to protect against. So I think understanding the basics and at least doing some awareness training may help.
Agreed. I think ultimately the only way they would become aware of it is if it becomes discussed in industry publications. I assume there's some sort of dentist monthly magazine or journal that a lot of dentists read, and maybe they start talking about, hey, a lot of your peers are suffering from this, or the American Dental Association, some industry group, maybe starts enforcing some requirements on their members to be a member of the group. I don't know. And you go all the way up to government level regulation, which is certainly possible. And we can see where that goes. HIPAA is ultimately good policy, but the thing you have to keep in mind is it literally dates back to the 90s. It's kind of old, and there's still some good stuff in it that's even relevant to today, but we could certainly even use some updates to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Our final story is from our friend Rachel Toback, who I follow on Twitter/X. And she posted something, and she's like a social engineering expert. That's what she does. And so she posted this 60 minutes clip where it was a parent talking about his experience of getting scammed and going through where he gets a phone call supposedly from his son, and his son says he was in an accident. He was drinking. He hurt someone in the accident. They're in the hospital. He's got a broken nose. He's getting taken to jail. And so all of this is happening, raising the anxiety levels of the parent. And as part of that, he says, hey, I need you to talk to this person, Barry Goldstein, who you need to post bail. And, oh, by the way, this system is closed, or this person is away who normally takes bail, so they can use the lawyer to help you escrow it and all this other stuff. And basically it's a scam, right? And so they're trying to get you in that moment of distress to send payment to this lawyer who's supposedly an agent for your son, who's going to be going to jail for something bad that they did. And so they were able to accomplish this all with AI generated voice clone. And I thought that was just super interesting because in this age of AI, now you have to worry about voice cloning. You have to worry about image cloning. I read another article about how if you're looking at all these different pictures that look like Pulitzer Prize pictures, they're all AI generated. So now you're wondering at the photos you're seeing online, whether or not they're AI generated, and possibly even the article itself. I know that actually there were a bunch of journalists or writers at a different company that were laid off because they thought they could use AI to generate all the different articles. So I just found this to be really interesting. Rachel said that she only needs 2 minutes of a voice sample to create a believable clone. And she was able to find clips on Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and other blogs in order to do that. And so I think back to a few weeks ago where we talked about that social engineer breach where someone called the service desk. And we talked about different ways to verify the user. Now you have to worry about voice cloning. I had someone talk about this in one of my calls, I believe, and I wanted to mention this because I thought it was a really, really good idea. Number one, and this is a little bit off topic, but it's more on the social engineering side of not getting duped into providing details over the phone. Number one, in the instance of, like, say, a password reset for your company and you're getting a phone call on the service desk, having a policy that has a zero tolerance rule where you have to provide something, and if that's not provided, then there's no help that's going to be provided in that case. There's no password reset provided. So a zero tolerance rule. And then the second one is, what is that thing that you're going to provide? And some ideas that actually came out of this call was, number one, you could use a video call, right, over some sort of means, FaceTime, Skype, Teams, Slack, whatever, Zoom, just do a video call verification and have them hold up like their physical copy of their ID, or if that won't work, have them come in physical person in order to do that. So there are ways to get around, the social engineering that way, is just having to verify your identity either physically in person or over a video call and like holding up your ID. So I thought that those were some cool ideas that I actually never thought of in order to provide a password reset or something like that. But that can help in this case with these AI generated voice clones.
The 60 minutes clip is all of 60 seconds or so. Definitely worth your time. I had seen this circulate a couple weeks or months ago now. It's not brand new, but I watched it tonight in preparation for the show. And it's pretty much what you'd expect. If you've seen any of the reporting these days around the ability to create believable voice clones, you do not need that much training data in order to do that. And this is something that can be used for fun. It can be used for positive purposes too. There are heartwarming stories of people who have lost their voice because of throat cancer or vocal cord surgery, who can't speak anymore, but they can have a synthesized voice that's very close to their natural voice with this technology. It's amazing. Or if you follow There I Ruined It on TikTok, which is a hilarious account that does all sorts of AI singing and takes singers singing things they've never said, or uses this singer to sing another singer's song. It's hilarious. I've been sharing it all the time. Like, they just did one recently where it's, what does bro country sound like to people who don't like bro country? And it's like truck, beer, women, truck, jeans, truck, dog, whatever. And it's Luke Bryan, but obviously he never sang it. Or there's one where Taylor Swift is singing a song about breaking up with Travis Kelce, which has not happened yet, but there's already a Taylor Swift inspired breakup song. So these can be used for comedy purposes, for genuine human purposes, but of course it can be used for malicious purposes too. And when you watch the clip, the thing that occurs to you is Rachel spoofs the phone number. So to the person, their phone rings, it's got the picture, it's got the name of the person calling because it hits on their contact list. It's the person calling according to the phone. And they open the phone and it's that person's voice saying, "Hey, I need my passport number because we're going on this work trip together. Can you grab that for me real quick?" And the person complies, no problem. And Rachel's talking to them and saying, "Well, why wouldn't you? What would make you think to not hear?" And so it becomes one of those things of, Andy, I think you talked about how do you create more trust in that model. Obviously, if someone is being held for bail and that's their one phone call, hanging up or doing a video call is definitely not an option. Do you create some sort of, for lack of a better term, a safe word, although using it in a different context than its normal context, but some sort of trusted word between you and your spouse or you and your parents to know that it's genuinely you? And that sounds like almost a tinfoil hat thing to do, but it's not. That's the thing. This is real. This is happening. People have fallen victim to this. It is not a theoretical thing. It is an actual thing that is actually happening. And so taking reasonable steps to mitigate that risk is not tinfoil hat. But I think if I went to someone and say, hey, we need to, talk about a word we use to validate our conversation, if we're asking for something that's sensitive or financially related, they'd think I was nuts. And I think that's going to be one of those hard things to wrap our mind around, is this is a very real threat. And it is so difficult, if not impossible, to detect, because it sounds like the person, it's coming from their phone number. Why wouldn't you trust it? You're going to have to create other means of validation, or just have skepticism. Thankfully, this is something my boomer mother will never have a problem with, because she doesn't do anything without asking 900 questions first. But maybe we can all have more of that, that state of skepticism before we comply with a request. But again, these people are really good at social engineering. What do? You create urgency. I don't have time for that. I just need this now. Look, my phone call's about to end. My time's almost up. They're going to haul me away. I need you to go post bail to, this gentleman here who's the attorney I'm working with. And they're going to go, okay, fine. I'll just do it. And there you go. So it's terrifying without a lot of good answers to solve for. I will say, just one last thought here. Swift on Security, which is another great Twitter follow if you're not following them, does a lot of posts around some open source models for generating images. And they have generated some incredible, really photorealistic images. And they're doing it with open source AI models that are running locally on their hardware. So it's not some sort of service that's running on the internet that's governed by responsible AI principles. And Andy and I both work for Microsoft. We mentioned that on nearly every show. One of the things Microsoft is doing that I really appreciate is in Bing Image Creator and Microsoft Designer, content that's generated with AI is going to have a watermark, a digital watermark in it, so that you can validate, hey, this was created with AI. And I think you'll see more of that going forward. But I think some of the problem is, this is where I'd say maybe in some ways the concern over AI in big tech is overblown, because I think big tech is really dedicated to responsible AI principles, safe AI principles, AI safety. And I think some of these open source models, they're the ones that have the most potential to be very maliciously used or misused. And that's where I'm greatly concerned with.
I love the idea of a challenge response that is between you and your family, or even in the case of a company. Like, you could have a challenge response rotated weekly or something like that. It sounds like spycraft, right? But challenge and responses have been used throughout history to basically certify that that person is a trusted person. So, I'm asking a question, you provide the response, and as long as it matches, it's good. So I think that is actually a really good thing. I might think about that with my kids and do something like that. I mean, it's the chances of something happening are slim, but having that there, could be as simple as, what's the weather like today? Oh, it's sunny in Florida, or something like that, right? Something completely innocent that would sound completely random or innocent to a person who's listening in, but it's the exact challenge and response that you've orchestrated and worked out.
I was a member of the Something Awful forums for years and years and years, joined in 2003 or something, until its kind of inevitable decline with the rise of other social media. But there actually was a well-known challenge and response for members of the forums, and it was, do you have stairs in your house? And the response was, I am protected, which was a callback to a story posted on the front page, somethingawful.com, a long time ago. And I forget even the origin of it. It's something about pusher robots or something stupid. But if you ever met someone in person and you thought they might be a goon, which was the term for another member of the forums, you could ask them, hey, do you have stairs in your house? And if they looked at you funny, it's just like, yeah. then you knew they weren't a goon. But if they responded, I am protected, you were able, it was kind of like the secret handshake. So you just reminded me of that.
Yeah. Fun story, totally off topic, but similar to this. There is a great bar in Milwaukee. I live in Wisconsin, so if you ever get the chance to go to Milwaukee, it's called the Safe House, and it is completely unmarked down a dark alley in Milwaukee, and the entrance is not marked. You have to like find it. When you go in, it's basically a very narrow wooden hallway, and it gets to like a person who's sitting there who looks like they're a host, and all it is just a little bench, and there's nothing else, a complete wall, and you have to give them the passphrase in order to get in. And when you get in, you'll see it's a massive bar. It's got like 11 bars inside and really good food. But you'll also see that there's a camera pointed at the entrance, because if people don't know the passphrase to get in, then they have to do a dance or they have to do something silly. And then, of course, everyone in the bar is watching them do that, right? They have to do the Macarena or the chicken dance or something like that. So because you guys are listeners of the show, I will give you the passphrase. So if you ever go to Milwaukee and you go to the Safe House, you give the person at the front to say, I'm looking for a safe house, and they'll let you in. And inside, it's all like spycraft, James Bond stuff, because it's designed to be like a safe house for spies. So super fun stuff.
That's awesome.
Anyways, that's the end of our show for this week. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, our contact information is in the show notes, as well as the links to all the topics that we talked about. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future, please contact us. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.